take a moment and simply stay here before you continue scrolling. Because if you found this message today, it may not be as random as it seems. It was not just another coincidence or a passing moment in your feed. Something deep within you may have been searching for these words, and somehow they found their way back to you. So remain with me for a little while. I want you to think about this special person right now. Let their face appear clearly in your mind. Then notice what happens inside you when it does. That gentle pull in your heart. That mixture of warmth, longing, and something that feels almost impossible to explain. That feeling is not confusion. It is your heart recognizing something your mind is still trying to fully understand. Because this person is not simply someone who entered your life by accident. On a deeper level, there may be something within you that already feels familiar with them, and I know how exhausting it can be to carry a love this powerful when everything around it feels uncertain. All those nights spent awake, holding these feelings quietly inside, wondering if you are imagining the signs, wondering if any of it will matter in the end. It matters more than you realize. You are not being foolish or unrealistic. You are not being overly emotional or dramatic. You are someone standing in the middle of an experience that could become deeply meaningful. And that is exactly why it feels so challenging right now. What makes these kinds of connections so intense is that they do not simply touch the surface of who we are. They reach directly into the parts of us we have spent years trying to manage, hide, or protect. Many people believe love should arrive like relief, like finally reaching calm waters after years of struggling to stay afloat. Yet the connections that truly transform us often arrive more like a storm before they bring peace. They shake loose everything hidden beneath old coping patterns, emotional defenses, pride, fear, and survival strategies. At first, that shaking can feel less like growth and more like everything is falling apart. When someone enters your life and reaches places nobody else could access, your protective habits suddenly stop working the way they always have. The person who constantly gives too much begins to recognize how exhausted they are from always proving their value and sacrificing their own needs. They start questioning why they believed closeness had to be earned through endless patience, effort, and emotional labor. That realization can be painful because it forces them to confront the possibility that they were taught love was something that had to be earned, rather than something they deserved simply by existing. At the very same time, the other person may be facing a different but equally frightening reality. They may have survived life by remaining emotionally distant. Closeness became connected to old pain, disappointment, betrayal, or loss. Their nervous system learned to view genuine intimacy as a threat. They pull away not because the connection lacks importance, but because the feelings become too powerful and difficult to control. On the surface, it may appear as though one person is pursuing while the other creates distance and seems overwhelmed. Beneath the surface, however, it is often two wounded systems responding differently to the exact same fear of rejection and inadequacy. The person who pursues may believe love will disappear without constant effort, making silence feel unbearable. Yet they must learn that abandoning themselves is too high a price to pay for any connection. Their value is not measured by how much pain they can endure for another person. Their worth is not determined by how long they can wait, how much they can sacrifice, or how deeply they can neglect their own needs in order to keep someone close. Meanwhile, the person who withdraws frequently carries the opposite wound. Somewhere deep inside them is the belief that if someone gets too close, they will eventually lose themselves, disappoint the other person, or become emotionally trapped. So they instinctively create distance the moment things begin to feel real. Yet that distance rarely brings the peace they expect. More often, it brings guilt, confusion, loneliness, and a stronger awareness of how much they actually care. Avoiding vulnerability may protect them from rejection temporarily, but it also prevents them from receiving the love they secretly desire. Healing is rarely graceful in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like confusion. Sometimes it appears as inconsistency, fear, emotional overwhelm, or long periods of silence while someone struggles to understand themselves more clearly. Growth often looks messy before it begins to look wise. The caterpillar literally dissolves inside the cocoon before becoming something entirely new. Transformation has always required a form of ending first. Not physical death, but the ending of old identities, defenses, and beliefs that can no longer survive within deeper love. That is why these connections can feel almost unbearable at times. They expose contradictions within us. They reveal how desperately we desire closeness, while simultaneously showing us how frightened we are of it. They force us to recognize the difference between attachment and genuine love. Attachment says, "Please do not leave me because I need you to complete what is missing inside me." Genuine love eventually says, "I want to meet you fully while also learning how to remain whole within myself." That shift changes everything. But there is a part of this journey that many people overlook. In every connection like this, there comes a turning point, and it rarely arrives through some dramatic event or long-awaited conversation. It does not happen because they finally say the words you have been waiting to hear. It happens because of a quiet decision you make within yourself. The decision to stop waiting endlessly to be chosen and begin genuinely choosing yourself instead. When that shift occurs, something within the entire dynamic begins to change. Not because love operates through magic, but because the energy we bring into a connection matters. When you stop reaching towards someone from a place of fear, desperation, or need, you stop becoming something they instinctively feel the need to move away from. For perhaps the first time, they are left alone with what they truly feel about you. Not what they fear, not what they have been avoiding, not what they have been distracting themselves from, but what genuinely exists within them. And what exists there may never have disappeared. I want you to trust something important. Everything you have experienced during this waiting period has carried meaning. Every single moment of it. None of it has been wasted. I know there are times when it feels that way, moments when you look back at all the love you have given and wonder whether it simply vanished into empty space, whether it reached anyone at all, whether any of it was worth the pain. Yet love does not simply disappear. It does not dissolve into nothingness. Every quiet evening spent thinking about someone who is not beside you, every night spent falling asleep with unspoken feelings in your heart, has shaped you in ways you may not yet recognize. That love remains real. It continues to deepen you, strengthen you, and expand your ability to hold something extraordinary if and when it finally arrives. When you cry because something that feels so right also causes so much pain, it is not evidence of weakness. It is not proof that you are fragile. Those tears often reflect a heart that refuses to abandon something it considers deeply meaningful. They reflect a rare kind of loyalty and emotional courage. Many people search for reasons to walk away when uncertainty becomes this difficult. They protect themselves before they can be hurt any further. It would have been easy to build walls around your heart. It would have been easy to convince yourself that loving this deeply was simply a liability. Yet here you are, still feeling, still caring, still hoping, even when part of you is tired. That says something significant about your strength. Not because endless waiting is always the answer, but because your capacity to love has survived circumstances that might have caused others to close themselves off completely. There is something remarkable about that. The truth is that real transformation often happens long before two people ever come together. Sometimes the greatest purpose of a connection is not immediately about union. Sometimes it is about growth. Sometimes it is about learning self-respect, emotional balance, healthy boundaries, and the ability to remain connected to your own worth, regardless of another person's choices. These lessons may not feel exciting while you are learning them, but they become invaluable later. And perhaps that is what this chapter has been teaching you all along. Not how to chase harder, not how to wait longer, not how to become more desirable, but how to return home to yourself, how to stop measuring your value through someone else's availability, how to recognize that your heart deserves care from you first before it seeks care from anyone else. Because the strongest version of love is never built upon fear. It is never sustained by anxiety, uncertainty, or emotional self-sacrifice. The strongest love grows between two people who are learning how to stand on their own while still choosing one another. It grows when both people stop running from themselves. It grows when honesty becomes safer than avoidance, and vulnerability becomes stronger than fear. No matter what happens next, do not underestimate how much you have already grown. The person you were before this connection is not the same person reading these words now. Your awareness has deepened, your heart has expanded, your understanding of yourself has become richer and more complex. Even the pain has taught you something valuable about what matters most to you. And if there is one thing worth remembering, it is this. The love you carry should never require you to abandon yourself. The connection that is meant to flourish in your life will not ask you to become smaller, quieter, or less worthy in order to keep it alive. It will invite you to become more fully yourself. It will encourage growth rather than self-erasure. It will support authenticity rather than endless striving. So, as you continue forward, carry this understanding with you. Continue caring if your heart chooses to care. Continue hoping if hope still feels true. But do not place your entire life on hold, waiting for certainty from someone else. Keep growing, keep becoming, keep choosing yourself every single day. Because the moment you truly do that, everything begins to look different. And sometimes, when you finally stop chasing what you fear losing, you discover that what is meant for you has been finding its way toward you all along. Many people get hurt or spend so long waiting that eventually they become quiet and begin closing themselves off because the emotional cost feels too great. You had every reason to make that same decision, and honestly, no one would have blamed you if you had. It would have been understandable. It would have made sense. Yet you chose a different path. You remained open when shutting down would have been easier. You stayed gentle when becoming hardened was available as the simpler option. In a world that often rewards emotional distance and guarded hearts, your decision not to become detached is not a weakness. It is a remarkable strength. It is a kind of courage that many people never develop because they stop trusting before they ever get the chance. To love deeply without constantly calculating what you will receive in return is incredibly rare. That kind of love becomes the foundation from which lasting and meaningful relationships are built. You chose to keep feeling, keep caring, and keep your heart engaged, even when circumstances seem to provide every reason to walk away. That matters more than you realize. To care about someone through confusion, through separation, through seasons where nothing feels certain and silence stretches endlessly, and to do it without becoming bitter or resentful, requires something extraordinary. It is not something that can be faked. It cannot be copied from a book or learned through observation alone. It comes from somewhere deep within a person. You either possess that capacity or you do not. And you do. That is not a small detail about who you are. It may actually be one of the most defining parts of your character. And it is precisely that quality that is guiding you towards something genuine. Not toward a relationship that leaves you permanently unsettled. Not toward a connection where you are constantly trying to decode mixed signals and hidden meanings. You are not moving toward a future where you endlessly wonder where you stand. You are not moving toward a love that keeps you bracing for the next wave of uncertainty. You are not headed toward a situation that makes your emotions feel too large for the space available to hold them. Instead, you are moving towards something that fits. Something that does not require you to shrink yourself or dim parts of who you are. A connection that feels natural rather than exhausting. A love that feels like finally taking a deep breath after holding tension inside your chest for far too long. That is not simply a poetic image. It is a very real possibility. But it depends on something important. It depends on what you choose to do next. So what does that actually look like? What do you do today, tomorrow, and in the days ahead? The answer is both simple and incredibly difficult. I am not going to make it sound easier than it is. You intentionally turn your attention back toward yourself. Not as a performance, not as a strategy designed to make someone miss you, not as a way to send a message or create a reaction, not as a method of proving anything. You genuinely begin bringing your energy home to yourself. You redirect the emotional investment that has been flowing outward and start pouring some of it back into your own life. You begin asking yourself a question that perhaps you have not asked honestly in a very long time. What do I actually need right now? Not what do they need. Not what can I do differently. Not what could I say to make things change. Not what would finally make them understand. Not what would bring them back. Not what would make them open up. What do you need? What would genuinely feel nourishing to you today? What areas of your own life have been waiting patiently for your attention, while so much of your focus remained fixed on something uncertain and slightly out of reach? You begin filling those empty spaces. You start saying yes to yourself with at least some of the enthusiasm you have been giving to everyone else. The dreams you postponed because you were waiting for life to feel more settled, you begin revisiting them. The experiences you delayed because your heart was occupied elsewhere, you begin allowing yourself to enjoy them. The friendships that drifted into the background while your emotional energy was focused somewhere else, you start reconnecting with some of those people. The parts of yourself that have been sitting quietly on a shelf, waiting for your attention, you bring them back into the light. None of this means pretending the love is gone. None of it requires you to deny your feelings. You do not have to force yourself to stop caring. You do not need to convince yourself that something meaningful meant nothing. This is simply about expanding your life again. It is about making sure your entire world is not built around one person and one possible outcome. It is about remembering that your life is larger than any single story. And when you genuinely begin doing this, something subtle starts to shift. It is not dramatic. It rarely happens overnight. Most people do not even notice it immediately. But it is real. You stop feeling like an unfinished sentence, waiting for someone else to complete it. You stop feeling as though your life is suspended in a permanent waiting room. You stop believing that everything important must pause until one particular situation finally resolves itself. Instead, you begin feeling whole again. You begin feeling like someone whose life contains purpose, movement, color, and meaning, regardless of what any one relationship is doing. You start feeling grounded in your own existence, instead of hanging emotionally from someone else's uncertainty. And that groundedness changes your presence. People around you sense it, even if they cannot fully explain it. There is something unmistakable about a person who feels genuinely at home within themselves. It creates a quiet confidence. It creates a calm strength. It creates a kind of magnetism that cannot be manufactured. Real magnetism does not chase, it attracts. And the person you have been loving through all of this will notice that difference too. Probably more than anyone else. They will feel the shift. This is not because it is some technique designed to produce a specific outcome. It is important that you understand that. The last thing you need is another strategy designed to control someone else's feelings. This is not about manipulation. It is simply what happens when someone stops relating from a place of emptiness and begins relating from a place of fullness. The entire dynamic changes. The connection breathes differently. Space opens up for something authentic to emerge that could not exist before. Now there is something else worth understanding. They are not the villain in this story. I know there have likely been moments when the hurt made it tempting to see them that way. Moments when the silence, inconsistency, distance or confusion made it easier to create a story where someone was clearly right and someone was clearly wrong. But people are rarely that simple. They are not cold-hearted. They are not indifferent. What you have been interpreting as distance is often something much more complicated. Many people learned long before they ever met you that love was dangerous. Somewhere in their past, closeness became associated with pain, disappointment, loss, or emotional overwhelm. Love came to feel expensive, risky, something that demanded more than they believed they could afford to give. They did not choose that belief consciously. No one does. It becomes woven into a person through experiences that shape them long before they have the words to explain what is happening. It becomes part of the way they protect themselves. So what looks like withdrawal is often someone managing a fear that has existed for years. They think about you during the quiet moments between distractions. In those spaces where there is no noise left to drown out what they truly feel, you are there. They notice the absence of your presence, even during periods when they were the ones who created that distance. There is a tension inside them regarding you that does not simply disappear because there is less contact. Because what they feel is not really about physical closeness. It is connected to something deeper that they have not fully worked through yet. And that unfinished work is not yours to carry. You cannot do it for them. No matter how clearly you see what they need, no matter how much love you have available to offer, no matter how strongly you want to help guide them through it. That journey belongs to them. The most powerful thing available to you is refusing to allow their fears to define your value. Refusing to absorb their unresolved wounds as evidence that something is lacking within you. Their struggle is their struggle. Their healing is their healing. And your worth remains intact, regardless of where they currently are on that journey. To carry yourself with genuine dignity and such steady self-respect that when they finally move through whatever has been holding them back, what they find is you at your very best. Not diminished by waiting, not emptied out by longing, not searching for validation that you should have been offering yourself all along. Instead, they find someone standing firmly in their own light, grounded, complete, and truly ready for what comes next. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a morning that may be closer than you realize. You wake up, and the first thing you notice is that the weight is gone. That particular heaviness that has lived in your chest for so long that you almost forgot it was there. That familiar pressure, that constant ache beneath the surface, has disappeared. Not because your feelings vanished, not because you stopped caring about this person, not because you forced yourself into emotional distance or convinced yourself not to love anymore. None of that happened. The weight is gone because the love finally has a place to belong. Because what once felt unresolved has finally found resolution. Because the thing that always seemed to exist somewhere in the future has finally arrived. It is no longer something you are waiting for. It is simply part of your reality. Imagine turning toward this person and truly looking at them, really seeing their face, and noticing something there that either has not been present before or has been absent for a very long time. You do not see hesitation anymore. You do not see conflict hiding behind their eyes. You do not see that familiar expression of someone who is physically present but emotionally holding part of themselves back. Instead, you see peace. Not a dramatic or overwhelming kind of peace. A quiet, settled peace. The kind that belongs to someone who has made a complete choice and is no longer questioning it. Someone who is not managing their feelings, not holding something in reserve, not keeping one foot out the door. Just someone who is fully there with you. Imagine what it would feel like to experience a love that no longer visits your thoughts at 2 o'clock in the morning as a source of anxiety. A love that does not keep you awake replaying conversations, searching for hidden meanings, wondering what you missed, or questioning what you could have done differently. Imagine a love where your nervous system finally gets permission to rest. A love where you are not constantly watching for signals. A love where you are not preparing yourself for disappointment. A love where uncertainty is no longer quietly sitting beside you every day. Imagine what it feels like when the question of whether you are enough simply disappears. Not because you spent years convincing someone of your worth, not because you finally proved your value, but because you are sharing your life with someone who never questioned your value in the first place. Someone who sees you completely. The parts of you that are polished and confident, the parts that are complicated and still growing, the pieces you are proud of, and the pieces you are still learning to understand. Every layer of who you are. And they choose all of it, not despite those parts, because of them. That vision is not some fantasy designed to comfort you through difficult days. It is not wishful thinking. It is the natural destination of two people who each committed themselves to healing. Two people who stopped showing up carrying old wounds and expecting the other person to repair everything life had damaged. Two people who took responsibility for their own growth. Two people who spent enough time learning themselves, understanding themselves, and healing themselves, that when they finally came together, they were genuinely available for something real. That is what is quietly being built right now. In the uncertainty, in the waiting, in the moments that feel confusing, in the difficult stretches where progress seems invisible. Every day you choose to care for yourself instead of dissolving into fear. You place another piece into the foundation of lasting love. Every time you choose peace over panic, self-respect over self-abandonment, and growth over obsession, you strengthen that foundation. Do not allow the difficulty of this middle chapter to convince you that the destination does not exist. The middle is almost always the hardest part. It is the stage where nothing feels certain, the stage where the finish line cannot be clearly seen, the stage where people often question whether they should continue at all.